Yeah, so we're bringing on Peter. Peter Nielsen is actually a client and friend of mine now, and a long time realtor and a long time apartment owner. And he's going to share his expertise with us and share a little bit about his deals, his some deal stories, and so here we are. So Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brett. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Will you give our listeners a little bit about your background and share a little bit about your current focus right now?
Sure. Well, as it relates to real estate, I figured out when I was fairly young that owning real estate was a really good deal. That occurred to me when I was in college and shared a flat with, I think, 5 other guys. And it was in a brick building with 3 flats. And I remember the landlord taking away like $1,000 a month, which way back in 1970, that was an awful lot of money for not having to show up to work every day. And I thought this is really a good deal. So once I graduated, I moved out to California, and I rented a room from a guy for a while. So I saw that he was doing the same thing. He was having roommates pay for his mortgage. So I thought that's a good deal. So I bought a house. And I used an FHA loan. I got a 5-bedroom house with a pool in San Diego and had 4 roommates paying for it. So that worked fine until I got married, and my wife didn't want to be living with all these roommates. So we bought a house for ourselves and turned the other one into our first full-time rental, and rented that until eventually we had tenants that wanted to buy it. And so they had a big family, and so we sold it to them, but I didn't want to pay the capital gains tax because just like recently, prices had been going up a lot. And so instead, I learned about doing a 1031 tax-deferred exchange. And so I exchanged that property into something else, which after another 8 or 10 years, I traded into something else and eventually something else until I ended up with an 18-unit apartment building in Sacramento, having never paid any capital gains tax over a period of about 40 years.
So let's slow down a little bit because you're getting to the crescendo there. But let's back up a little bit before, Peter. So you're in San Diego, but before San Diego, before you're in the days of buying and owning real estate and having renters pay for your mortgage and buying other properties. Tell us about Peter. Who was Peter growing up? Where are you from, Peter, originally? And more importantly, kind of what gifts were you given, Peter, that has helped you now in your looking back? What gifts were you given as a child that helped you in your real estate career or your investing career?
I grew up in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, on a dairy farm. And I actually stayed working on the farm, milking cows, my first 2 years of college at kind of a branch campus. And then I transferred to the University of Wisconsin at Madison to get my computer science degree. So I always had a kind of an analytic bent, and I liked numbers, which I think that is always useful when it comes to investing in real estate. Apart from that, I would say just growing up, just watching my father, who never took a vacation, worked 7 days a week. There was just this, maybe it's a Midwestern work ethic that I took with me that has helped me through the years.
Absolutely. So on the dairy farm, that must have been kind of fun. What was your routine? I mean, I'm sure he put you and maybe your brothers or sisters to work. What was your favorite part of the dairy farm lifestyle?
I can think of a lot of things I didn't like. Picking rocks in the field. I wasn't too fond of milking the cows. But there were some fun parts. I loved working the fields, with tractors and implements. That was a lot of fun. And it got very cold in Wisconsin too, so that wasn't so much fun either, having to, get out a little bit in the wintertime.
Sure. So you moved to San Diego to get out of the cold and maybe
Yeah.
closer to the beach, and maybe you met your wife now at the time. Maybe it was your girlfriend at the time, and fast forward, you buy a property. You found out that you could put FHA loan, a low down payment, and then you can get renters or get roommates, and who can pay for your rent. So you bought and lived and rented out along the way. That was your first deal.
Right. And it was $2,500 down payment. That's all it took. Of course, today that would be the same.
Easy.
That might be worth 10,000, but at the time, that's what it took.
Sure. Excellent. And so then at that point, you decided you didn't want to pay the tax, and so you did it. You did a 1031 exchange, and that's really started the journey of deferring tax, owning real estate, and living off either passive or active income. Just talk us to a little bit about that as a whole. How did that, when you made that shift to, oh wow, I can own something that pays me something when I'm not always there. Walk us through that shift of I think this might be a great way to invest and build wealth.
Well, until I got my real estate license, I worked in a computer field. Basically, I worked for Fair Isaac, installing credit scoring systems around the country. So I always had a good salary for that. And then when I became a real estate agent, um, your income fluctuates a lot depending on the deals you have in a given year. Um, so, it was always nice to have rental income kind of filling in the valleys there. And then now I'm to the point where, I'm looking at retiring. Um, it's just great to have that as an income stream, regardless of whether I continue to sell real estate or not. Um, when I take that plus Social Security plus 401k type that I stashed away earlier, I can pretty much, I think, live pretty well regardless of what happens. But a lot of that is because I have the rentals.
Excellent. And talk to us about your experience with the rentals. Right, we talked about some of the positives, which is the income, which is the appreciation you've had over the years. But there's also some challenges with real estate. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced over the years, or maybe some funny stories about tenants or collections, or or having to catch up on deferred maintenance? Walk us through some of the challenges you faced.
Okay. Well, I faced the biggest challenges with the biggest property, which was the Sacramento property, and there as well because I was 100 miles away. So I would spend a lot of weekends there, or at least maybe a Saturday. Whenever there was a vacancy, I'd go up to oversee getting the apartment ready to rent. When I first bought the property, it came with a property management company, but they weren't local. They were from Stockton, and so they had kind of a sketchy presence at the property. And there were a lot of things that they did that I didn't agree with. Um, for example, whenever a tenant was late on the rent, um, they would issue a 3-day notice, to pay rent or quit. And to me, well, and then it isn't that they issued it; they hired a lawyer to go and issue it. So it cost $85 to the tenant every time they were, a day late. And so my philosophy was, if they're late, you talk to them, you find out why they're late, you see if you can work out something, and you only issue this 3-day notice, which is the first step in the eviction process, if you intend to follow through with an eviction. So they were issuing these notices left and right, and it was adding to the tenant's liabilities, and that was just one thing. So I decided just at the end of the term to not renew their contract and just to manage it myself, which, I think I did pretty well. I was able to handle all of the accounting adequately, what every tenant paid, and if they were late, what their late fees were and all that kind of stuff. But I had sort of inherited you have to have, someone on site who is the property manager, even though they don't do a lot of the type of management things that someone else might do, but you have a resident manager. So I had a couple that was living in the apartments, and they had some experience. He was a handyman, which I thought, well, that's great to have a handyman living there as your resident manager. And the wife was somewhat experienced with office work. So I thought, well, when the resident manager moved out, and she did right away when I bought the place, I thought I'll bring this couple down. So I brought them down, and then they became like the biggest tenant headache I had. They had 2 dogs. They're not supposed to have any dogs. At one point, their daughter brought in a dog and maybe 2, so they had, I think, 4 dogs in the place. And he was a hoarder. And so when I would knock on the door, the wife would like peek her head out, but she would never let me in the building. And I would peek around, and I could see it was just piled high to the ceiling. And this is in the living room on top of the couch with junk. so they were a bit of a headache. And my problem, I didn't want to just throw them out, because when I took them in initially, they had been homeless, living in a van. I didn't want to put them on the street. So I kind of suffered through dealing with them the whole time I was there. And now looking back on it, I think it was some funny stories, but it would get frustrating when I was
You
there.
can laugh or cry, right? I mean, it's a little bit of both, because it's painful, because it's real people's lives, and you're providing housing. At the same time, you're trying to pay a mortgage, and you're paying to pay for your expenses, and also provide a safe environment for everyone else who's living in the area, whether it be dogs or people when they hoard. They can become a fire hazard, for the whole complex. There's so many things around that, but it's not easy. The point is, it's not easy being an owner, especially of apartments, especially multiple units, especially in areas that are lower income or more challenging areas, for sure. But it's definitely a service we need. And in California right now, we're in a housing crisis. And as a part of that, it's because it's so expensive to build, and which makes it even more challenging to rent, because there's just not a supply, and there's just so much demand, which puts a lot of stress and pressure also on landlords. So you're owning these units, and I remember when I sat down and met with you, and I asked you kind of what was happening, and you said, well, I've had a manager, and then I kind of done it myself. I've had some challenges. So kind of take us to the let's shift a little bit into the Deferred Sales Trust, because I know a lot of our listeners are curious on actual deal stories that have closed, and people who have been in your shoes, and they've been in a lot of your shoes, owning multifamily apartments or different asset classes and having to deal with different tenant issues. So take us kind of to the particular reason that you were even thinking about selling the 18 units. What was the particular problem that you were having with the property before you decided to sell?
Well, the problems were just the usual things. Vacancies, although I kept it pretty well rented the whole time. But I had lots of problems with the laundry room. It had a laundry room with 2 washers, 2 dryers, and it would constantly get broken into. People would go in there and smoke dope, crack. I don't know what they're smoking, but sometimes there would be a homeless person living in there. And then I'd get on my manager, why are you letting these people live in there? And he'd say, well, they broke the lock, and, stuff like that. But it was going along all right. And then I got an offer just out of the blue, came to me from a woman, and she had signed up for one of these get rich in real estate with other people's money courses. Get deals and sign them to others and all that kind of thing. So she came to me with an offer, and then forget exactly why she couldn't follow through. I think she couldn't get a loan, probably was the reason. But having studied in one of these courses, she went out and kind of shopped the contract and found somebody interested in taking it over. So then he became my ultimate buyer. So I never, contrary to what I would advise any client of mine, I never put it on the open market, on the multiple listing service or on LoopNet. I just had this offer, and I went back and forth on the price until I thought I got a good deal, and it was over the few years that I had it, it went up a lot in value. So I was happy with the number that we ended up with. So that's how I came to be in contract, and I didn't want to go out and buy another property that was larger, have a bigger mortgage, because I'm just at that point in my life where I'm just kind of winding down from buying real estate and managing it, and so
take us back to 2008. I know you mentioned, Peter, before the crash of '08, that you remember owning the real estate, seeing all the turmoil. And what was your experience with 2008 and the properties that you owned during that time, and negotiating with the banks, and how did that all transpire for you, and how were you able to survive and work through all that?
I think that the properties that I had low enough mortgages. I never had to negotiate with the banks for any mortgage relief. Instead, I think it was at around that time that I realized that things were selling at such low prices that it would be a good time to buy. And so that's when I bought an 8-unit building in Richmond, which I still have. And that one's easier to manage because it's just a quick trip over the Richmond Bridge from San Rafael, where I live, a 20-minute drive, and I'm there. And the tenants are a little better in terms of income and responsibility and so on. So it's been a good investment. And for right now,
So distance and obviously
the stock
location,
market crashing, because it might be a good time now to buy again.
Yeah, we'll see what happens here. So back to your 18 units you had in Sacramento, you're owning that. You're frustrated with the management. You're frustrated with the tenants. You're frustrated with driving in traffic. And although you're still making a good return, and you got an offer on the table, and you say, hey, now I think I might consider selling. What was different about the Deferred Sales Trust when you learned about it for the first time versus the traditional 1031 exchange for you?
Well, the big difference is you don't have to go out and buy another replacement property, and that's the big thing.
Now, why didn't you want to do that again, Peter?
I just been doing it my whole life, just tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thinking about retiring.
I think one of the quotes you told me was, I had 18 problems, Brett. I didn't need 36 problems, right? I didn't want to trade my 18 units for 36 units. And I said, yeah, Peter, I don't blame you. A lot of my clients, they've made their wealth. They've earned it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And right now they don't want any more debt. They just want to preserve the capital, and they don't necessarily want to overpay in a highly appreciated marketplace, and they'd rather just be on the sidelines and wait until the market shifts. So take us to the moment when you finally realize, hey, this Deferred Sales Trust could actually solve the problem that you were looking for. Walk us through that thought process, because I know when I first met you, you had never heard about it. And now it's this new thing that you're going to do, right? But take us to that moment when you said, this is actually going to solve my problem.
Well, I guess when you were able to show me how the funds from the sale would go into a trust and be invested in such a way that they could yield a steady monthly distribution, then it seemed like the amount of return coming from the capital was about the same as the net income from the property after all the expenses were taken out. So it just turned out to be, about the same income and then minus most of the headaches.
Yes. And then what does life look like now that you sold the property, your headaches are gone, and you're, essentially completely, truly passive from owning commercial real estate and dealing with tenants?
Well, I'm not completely out of it. I've still got other properties, but I just have more time on the weekends, which is when I would typically go up to Sacramento to deal with things there. So that's basically it. Just
So
more
more
time.
time. Yeah, more time, more energy to do what you want with it. And I appreciate you sharing part of your story. And so now shifting a little bit for what you're doing locally, because you're in Marin, California, that area. And there's a lot of folks that are your age and have owned properties for a long time, and even single family residential primary homes, which the Deferred Sales Trust works for as well. So talk us about a little bit about the, kind of your area and your neighbors and what you see in just the highly appreciated single family home market where you're a realtor yourself.
Well, I think you're right. There are a lot of highly appreciated homes in Marin. I think there's a challenge in that most of the owners haven't heard of a deferred sales trust. And so a lot of them are just hanging on to the properties, and I think are going to pass them on to their children rather than selling them. Um, so,
What would you tell them right now if you had a chance to talk to them and said, hey, that's a viable option, but if you want to sell, what would you tell them about the deferred sales trust or want them to understand about it?
well, if you want to sell, then the deferred sales trust is a way to defer all the capital gains on the sale after you subtract out the first $500,000 if you're a married couple of appreciation that you get tax free anyway. So, if you have a $1 million property profit, which isn't unusual, someone bought a house for 250,000, now it sells for $1,250,000. They take away 500,000 tax free. They still have a $500,000 gain that they have to pay tax on. So this would be a way to defer the tax on that gain pretty much indefinitely, maybe even so that their children can get the benefit of the income from that trust after they're gone.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that's exactly right. And we actually just closed a deal like that in Cupertino. It was a $3.1 million sale house about 3 miles away from Apple headquarters. And the same thing. She had a substantial gain. She was single, so she just had the 250 exemption for the 121 exclusion. But she was able to defer somewhere around $400,000 above and beyond that amount and sell and also pay off her debt, which I think was so important for her to be debt free from her house and then put it into a income producing assets, which can be real estate, which could be stocks, bonds, mutual funds. It could be hard money lending. The choices are kind of endless there. So back to just the shifting a little bit, Peter, I'm just curious what you think about the current coronavirus going on and how that might affect real estate, how that's affecting the economy. What's your take on it?
Well, I don't know that it's the virus so much as it is the stock market. The stock market tanked because of the virus, but at least in Marin, historically, the price of homes has tracked pretty well the ups and downs of the stock market. So if the stock market goes down and stays down, I think we're going to see lower home prices. regarding
Walk us through that again. So you said it kind of tracks the stock market. So historically speaking, you found if the stock market's really high, prices of houses tend to be higher, and then the stock market takes a hit or goes lower, prices go lower. Is that a fair summary of what you just said?
yeah, exactly. Hmm.
Any particular reason you think maybe Marin, or is that just sort of, is that also San Francisco? Is that also, let's say Silicon Valley or San Jose, any of those other highly appreciated areas? Or is it just, you think it's more particular, you found that in Marin?
And I don't know about the other counties. I would think it might be similar, but just thinking about it, um, if someone wants to buy the median priced home in Marin, which is about $1.2 million, um, chance, and you're going to put 20% down, so you need, I don't know, 250,000 or something cash down. Most people don't have that sitting in their bank account. They probably have it in the stock market, and they're probably thinking they would sell the stock to make the down payment on the house. And if the stock goes from a value of 250 down to 180, now they can't afford the down payment on the house anymore. So the prices are going to have to go down. My thinking.
I see. So it's in correlation to the exact down payment that they might need, which is typically 20%. And that's typically where it's held, what you found in Marin for down payments. And if the stock market goes down, obviously they don't have as much to put there down, therefore the prices have to go lower. Hey, that makes good logical sense to me. What's your outlook for this? How long do you think this might last, and what's kind of your gut feeling based upon your experience with different recessions and different economic crises?
Well, I think that's more of a medical question, and I'm not a medical person. But at this
Maybe that's
point,
why it's so different, right? It's why it's so hard
yeah,
to predict, because it truly is a medical question, and
right,
it's something that it's hard to really throw, I think, a stimulus package at or money at, because you're dealing with something that it's hard to get your hands really around,
right.
and except for trying to take these actions that we can take. But sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I was going to say, so far, it seems like the hospitals aren't overrun with patients or that sort of thing. I mean, we've seen kind of um, the fear reaction at lines at Costco, and runs on toilet paper, but we haven't seen
Yeah.
deathly ill people in the hospital. So you have to kind of wonder, well, is this thing really overblown a lot? And yet, I guess it wasn't overblown in Italy, and we're trying to avoid having the sort of problems that they have had with coffins lined up in the streets. So um, I guess it's all going to depend on how well this current social separation works out as to slow the virus down.
Well, let's hope it does work out, and so that the economy kind of recovers quickly here. And
Yeah.
so, are you ready for the lightning round? And then we'll finish with the last question, and we'll be done.
Okay.
All right.
Shoot.
Maybe a favorite bit. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe a favorite business book or a favorite book that you really love.
Um, well, I'm going to be honest here, and that I'm not a big book reader. I read a book when I go on vacation, and when I do, I pick it from the stack of whatever in the living room that my wife has stacked up because she reads voraciously. Um, so I read the news. I read 2 newspapers a day, and I'll read magazines. But to
What's your
me,
favorite newspaper you read every day?
well, I just read the Chronicle and the local Marin Independent Journal.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
but to me, I think I feel too antsy sitting and reading a book. Like I should be doing something productive, unless I'm on the beach. Then
It's
if I'm
that
on vacation, I can
it's
read a
that
book.
dairy farmer in you, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
think
that
that's
dairy
it.
farmer. You got a cow to milk. You got something to do. There's always work to be done here, 24/7 when you're dad.
Right.
All right. How about favorite maybe podcast or anything that kind of maybe you listen to?
Um, well, I don't really listen to any podcasts, but in terms of listening in general, I love watching Austin City Limits. You know, I love the
Nice.
music.
And I saw.
Yeah.
Okay, Austin City Limits and music. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. And maybe your favorite inspirational or leadership quote you could leave with us.
No, but I'm one of those either.
Well, I know you have your cat in the background, and we talked about your cat. Your cat, his name is, what's your cat's name? That might be inspirational for everybody here.
Yeah, Thor. Yeah, we call him Mighty Thor because he used to go out and he would catch gophers.
Gophers.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Mighty Thor. I love that. Well, that's inspirational to me, at least. So, last question, Peter, and then we'll let you go. Just curious, after all your success and all your years of wisdom and experience with real estate investing and help people buy and sell, homes, and after all of these years, how do you stay centered, Peter, in your values, your personal values, and how do you stay encouraged to reach to new goals?
Hmm. Well, you asked some tough questions here at the end. All I can say is to take a break, from working. I like riding my Harley. That's sort of my release, my energy release, and do that. Maybe that keeps me centered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's great. My dad has a Harley, and I'm afraid to get on one because I think I'm going to love it so much. And I got 5 kids, and my wife would kill
Oh,
me
yeah.
if I would ride around in there. But my dad has one. I know it's in the blood. I grew up riding on the back of his as a kid, and so I could absolutely see how that's a great way to kind of be free and kind of let kind of be away from everything while you're riding a bike. So, well, Peter, I want to thank you for your time, your energy, and sharing your wisdom with us today. And it's inspirational. It does help those who are looking at buying and selling investment real estate, and those who are looking at the Deferred Sales Trust for the first time. I want anyone who's listening right here now who lives in anywhere near Marin, San Rafael, and is looking for a realtor. Peter is as wise. He is experienced, and he is a servant at heart. He can really help you out. So if you are interested, Peter, where could someone find you? What email address could they send an email to?
Email is Peter at Marin Realty Experts.com.
Excellent. So that's Peter at marinrealtyexperts.com, and that'll be in the show notes. We want to thank everyone for watching and attending and or listening to the show today. As always, we believe that having a plan and having a proven tax deferral strategy is the best way for you to create and preserve more wealth, especially with your investment real estate as you go to sell it or high-end primary home that you might be selling. And so reach out to us today if you have any needs or questions from our end. We love the opportunity to help you create such a plan. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of your